Heather, welcome and thank you for joining us on Net Zero Conversations.
Absolute pleasure, thank you.
You are Executive Director at the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Fair Business Banking. That's quite difficult to say. Can you tell us a bit about that group, please?
So it's a group of about 140 MPs and peers within Westminster who have an interest in kind of the relationship between businesses and financial services sector and making sure that the financial services sector kind of does the best for businesses in the UK.
And you also were involved in setting up the Net Zero Alliance for the banking sector, is that right?
Yes, so I co-founded a project called Bankers for Net Zero. It was originally just supposed to be a one-off project that lasted for a year until COP26, which turned into 2 years, of course, because of COVID. And it was born out of the idea that we could see that there was going to be a really kind of intense change that the whole industry was going to be going through, and fundamentally that was going to change relationships, because ultimately banks were in the process of redefining risk and redefining value, which of course are fairly central to the financial services sector. So we just wanted to make sure that we started the conversations early with businesses, with banks, and making sure, and with politicians as well and policymakers, to make sure that we have as much of a glide path as possible rather than cliff edges. Because if the wrong incentives are put in the wrong place, it could become very difficult. So that was really the kind of origin of that initiative. And since then, it's kind of grown arms and legs. And we're now the UK country chapter of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So we're the first country chapter in the world. And it is very much about taking the commitments that have been made at a high level and then translating those into what that looks like on the ground, given our particular legislative, regulatory, cultural framework that we have within the country.
So what types of things will banks be doing to be able to activate those commitments that they've made? What does that mean in practice?
It's really tricky actually in practice, because, not to put too fine a point, but a lot of these commitments cannot be kept without significant policy intervention. So a perfect example, because banks have signed up to decarbonise their Scope 3 emissions and go through the entire loan book, they're essentially responsible for the carbon emissions of every household that has a mortgage.
Right, yeah, of course.
And every small business. So to get that kind of the retrofitting, that level of decarbonisation and that level of behavioural change, that's often stuff that really needs to happen from government, and industry can support that. So there's a lot of tricky discussions on how do we engage with the retrofit agenda? How do we engage with supporting SMEs? Those are the two areas we've done deep dives into so far. The plan is to go into another sector, probably agriculture next, and then take those. And essentially, to a certain extent, we're also trying to de-risk some of the bold policy decisions that parliamentarians need to make in order to move the agenda forward. So it is very much about having the kind of tough conversations, because you've got a lot of competing interests in the room. But we were very keen that this initiative involved a very broad curve. So we've got WWF and E3G involved, and Nigel Topping was on our original steering committee before we've turned it into this long-term kind of project now. So we've had a lot of tough conversations, but I think that's the whole point, is engaging not just with the sustainability teams within the banks, but starting to do workshops where you actually engage with the people that are dealing with clients and that are front-facing. So trying to make it more real, I guess, for the industry.
And I think it's fascinating, kind of this part of the conversation, because actually what we're talking about here is often very small businesses who may want to take steps to reduce their carbon footprint, but simply don't have the kind of access to finance or the know-how to make those changes. So the role of government and policy is really important. Is that something that the Alliance, have you got an active work stream on policy engagement? What are the sorts of conversations you're having with policymakers?
So loads. We work really closely with BEIS and Treasury in particular, so BEIS on the retrofit team. So we meet with them quite regularly to talk about ideas that they may have. We're certainly looking to do something for the SMEs in the country, which would involve basically BEIS and all the major kind of business representatives like the CBI and the IOD and the Institute of Directors and whatnot, and the financial services sector, and seeing how we can use the kind of banking system as a conduit for this information to kind of get out there as well.
And you mentioned also earlier about mortgages.
Yeah.
And can you expand on that a little bit more? Because that's another interesting area where we can all try to decarbonise our homes more and more if we knew how.
Well, absolutely. And I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have, is particularly around the retrofit agenda. And because you're talking about people's homes, it's quite personal. And best will in the world, if you take a few kind of points off of mortgage and somebody saves 50 quid a month, they're not really that's not going to inspire the behavioral change that we need in order to really properly retrofit our homes and whatnot. So our kind of proposals have been that we need to go really heavy on some kind of mass social housing retrofit kind of projects in order to start bringing the cost curve down, because essentially it's still it's boutique right now, retrofitting. So it's kind of like going to a nice little boutique shop on the high street, where really it needs to be kind of IKEA standard, where
exactly,
or B&Q, where it's just what's done, and we're just not there yet. And really, a lot of that is going to rely on the policymakers leading that, but because of the commitments that banks have made, all of a sudden you've got financial institutions much more interested in this, in the fabric of the buildings that they're actually lending on. And there's loads of risks that come with this as well. So if we don't do it well, you can end up in a situation where we get unmortgageable properties, all that. So you've got to really kind of navigate your way through carefully. Otherwise, the unintended consequences can be quite severe.
Now, of course, you are focused work on the UK, but are you seeing similar type of activity in banking sectors in other countries as well?
No, I know that there are some alliances, but certainly I think the ambition is that other country chapters do evolve out of this, and we've quite purposely got a lot of international organisations that sit on our advisory board. But that's certainly, I know that the UN are quite keen for other countries to kind of evolve as well and do something similar.
And one final question, if you don't mind, Heather. As we look forward to COP27, in your opinion, what do you think is the one thing that really we need to get right so that the summit is a success?
I think that we're going in the right direction in terms of the focus is now on implementation rather than the commitments. And we need to start speaking the same language, I guess, first and foremost. I always like to say right now, the way that we kind of measure sustainability in ESG, it would be the equivalent of the big four starting to compete with each other on how they present a balance sheet or a profit and loss. It's a ludicrous idea, isn't it? And we're still in that mode. And so I think that's the implementation, the consistency is probably the things that we need to really focus on now.
So presumably you are a fan of the introduction of globally consistent disclosure standards?
Yes, definitely.
And looking forward to the ISSB standards coming in.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. All right, well, many thanks and lovely to talk to you.
A pleasure. Thank you.